Hello, good afternoon, evening, whatever. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ari, and I'm going to go over my January wrap-up for today, or at least what I haven't already covered. I read 18 books in January. 11 of them I covered in my other challenge, which will be up in the... Nope, this side. It'll be up in the little eye in the corner. What is that? The cards. That's what it's called. The cards. But I ended up reading 18 books this month, which gives us 7 books that weren't covered on that wrap-up. So in this video, we're going to go over those 7 books. So I read 4,268 pages this month, which roughly averages out to 237 pages per book. The first book I'm covering, I read for my book club. Books with Bells on Instagram runs a monthly book club, and I will also link the Instagram for that book club in the description below, so if you want to join the book club, you're more than welcome to. Last month we read The Curiosities by Susan Gloss. The Curiosities is about a art colony, and it is from the perspectives of 5 different characters. You have Neal, who is like, what is the word? Like almost a curator. She's the person in charge of the art colony. It has a job title which is slipping my mind right now, but she's kind of like does secretarial work, organizes the colony, makes sure everybody shows up on time, and does everything based on what the will asks for it. So she's kind of like the main character of the book. I hated her guts. Her entire reason for taking this job was she miscarried a baby. Not really miscarried. The baby was born very, very early, and it hadn't existed long enough to survive outside of the womb, so it was like a very late term miscarriage, I guess would be the best way to say that. And she drove her and her husband into staggering debt trying to get pregnant again through in vitro treatments. But she didn't bother to tell her husband that she was driving them into debt, so she opened credit cards in their name and then didn't tell him about it. He thought everything was being covered by insurance. So, scummy, didn't like her. It was supposed to be a redemption story. I still didn't like her. I'm just going to list the characters in order from least like to most like. Make it easy. The next character is Paige. She's kind of like a stereotypical millennial, always on her phone, has no real social skills, sleeps around with a lot of guys because she's afraid of commitment, blah blah blah. She was too stereotypical and I didn't like her. It was like, it felt like it's insulting my generation by just making these like broad generalizations about this character, and no millennial is actually exactly like boomers pretend they're like, and this character was that girl. So I didn't like it because I just felt like it was stereotypical in an offensive way. Then Odin is the middle ground character where I didn't give a shit about him because he had like no purpose. His only purpose seemed to be to like make Nell want to have an affair with her husband, which made Nell more scummy. And then Odin was just kind of like, you needed a male character for her to do that. There was no real point in having anything from his point of view. I'm not sure why he was even in the story. Next is Annie, who is an older woman, and she's an artist who like grew up through an activist. So activism in art is kind of what she does, and she does different types of art based off of what's going to gain attention towards her activism. So really loud, really in your face, offensive, and it's meant to be offensive, to grab attention, to bring attention to problems. I guess I should say that Paige, Odin, and Annie are all of the residents of the art colony. They're artists in the art colony. Then the last point of view is from Betsy, who is the woman who set up the funding for this art colony. She is dead at the time of this book, so all of the scenes from her perspective are all flashbacks to the past. She's just like a cool rich person. Like, I don't really have anything else to say about her. She just seemed like a really awesome human being, very understanding of like human nature, and her flashbacks were cool because it was all just like the really cool parties and stuff that she did in her life. I gave Curiosities 3 stars. I figured with 5 characters, if I hated 2, liked 2, oops, can't do that, liked 2, and then 1 I didn't care about, that seemed like a perfect 3 stars right in the middle. The next book I'm talking about is The Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. I finished this book on January 1st. I actually started it in December and just didn't finish it before the year was up. But I'm going to talk about it now because technically I finished it in January, so I didn't get a chance to talk about this or post it on my Instagram. This is the middle book in the Arc of Scythe series. It follows characters Ronan and Citra, who have, in the first book, they're apprentices. In this book, they become scythes. And I can tell who they are on the cover by the color of the robes, which is how you identify scythes. He is known as Scythe Lucifer, and she is known as Scythe Anastasia, as in Anastasia Romanoff. And it kind of follows their adventures after the first book, where they're apprentices, and now they're like actual scythes. And she is like a good scythe who is changing the world for like the better, like through her own example. Like, she's doing things to make scythes more respected. And then he is kind of like, I am going to take out all of the scythes who are bad, and kind of like murderous spree type thing. There is another character in here whose name I cannot remember. I don't know why I can't remember it, but he is the person who talks to the Thunderhead, who is the computer that runs this world. So scythes cannot interfere or speak with the Thunderhead. The Thunderhead can't interfere with scythes. They have no communication with each other, but regular society can talk to the Thunderhead, and like, you don't really need to do anything. Like, society is organized for you. Like, there's no poverty, there's no starvation, there's no death, that kind of thing. The character whose name I can't remember for God only knows what reason, because I'm really bad with names, he is like our connection to the Thunderhead through this book. It was really good. It's great with like world building, good middle book, because a lot of middle books are like super boring. This I gave 4 stars, so obviously wasn't very boring. It had its own like internal plot, which built for the overall plot of this trilogy. I liked it a lot. From here, I am going to move into the books that I read for my Goodreads Choice Awards challenge that I have for this year, where I read the winner and then the highest rated book from each category over the course of this year. There's no rhyme or reason to the order that I'm reading these in. It's mostly like as I can get them from my library, because a lot of these, they're obviously very, very popular books from 2019, so there's a backlist on it, and I don't want to buy any of these books. I don't know if I'm going to like them. I'm expecting that I won't like them, so we wait for the library. And I just kind of like grab them. I've got ebooks, audiobooks, physical books. It's all over the place. These I am going to do not in the order that I read them, but we're going to go kind of star rating, so randomly within the 4 stars and randomly within the 3 stars. I didn't give anything outside of a 3 or a 4 star this month, so we'll start with the 3 stars. And first is Dear Girls by Ali Wong. This is the winner of the humor category, and I don't know. I didn't know, still don't really know who Ali Wong is. Like, I understand that she is a comedian, a writer, and an actress, but like, I could walk by her on the street and I would have no idea who she is. I'm not big on humor for the sake of humor. Like, I like finding humor in things, but I don't want to read something that the entire purpose of it is to be humorous. Now, what I've discovered from this book is Ali Wong is very much like an in-your-face type humor thing, where like she's talking about like one of her sets is where she like literally moons the audience and shows them her asshole. Like, not, I don't think of myself as like particularly prudish, but if not liking humor like that makes me prude, then I'm just perfectly fine with being prude. But this book is letters to her daughters. She has 2 young daughters, and these are letters addressed to her daughters, which is dear girls. And I don't know about you guys, but I would not want to read about my mother sleeping with a bunch of guys in New York and all of them having erectile dysfunction. Like, that is just something that I can go my entire life without knowing about my mother. Like, I don't really want to know it about Ali Wong, but I really wouldn't want to know it about my mother. And it's just fart jokes, really crude humor, really over-sexualized for the sake of, like, shock. But once you get past all of that, the, like, stuff she's telling her daughters is actually, like, good advice. So it's about being a daughter, like a child of an immigrant, different things like that. Racism, feminism. Yeah, so I didn't like her particular brand of humor, but I enjoyed the book for the context outside of the over-sexualized stuff. And I kind of landed again in the middle ground at 3 stars. The next book on this list was Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. And the title is probably one of the most amazing titles I've ever heard. This is the kind of book that I would pick up and just like read the synopsis on the back just to see what it's about simply from reading the title. Now, what this actually is about is this lady, Caitlin Doughty, is a mortician, and she runs a YouTube channel where she talks about mortician stuff. And she's also like gone on like tours and stuff like that. And this book is basically like questions that children have asked her over the years of giving these public appearances, speeches, YouTube things. And each chapter is just like a different question about death. So you've got like, obviously the first question is, will my cat eat my eyeballs? And the answer is eventually, if it's starving to death. But your dog is much more likely to just like eat your eyeballs trying to like wake you up. So there you go. You've learned something new that didn't really spoil anything in the book. That's literally like the first line of the book. And you've got like, if somebody died in space, what would happen? If, like, why was my grandmother wrapped in cellophane inside her coffin? Like, there's a bunch of different, like, really interesting questions in there. Overall, it was something that I probably would have rather learned from a YouTube video than an entire book about it. So while it was interesting, it wasn't life-changing or something like that I felt was like an important read. So I gave it 3 stars. Take it or leave it. Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs was the winner of the science and technology category. Moving into 4-star territory, we have A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. And I'm still sure that I'm pronouncing her first name wrong. I have no idea. This is a story of 3 Pakistani women, or Iranian, I think they're Iranian, but Middle Eastern women, Islamic Muslim women who have imported from, or to America. And it's kind of a fight of 3 different generations of respecting their culture and their upbringing and trying not to become over Americanized while they're still like fighting like sexism and disrespect and like not wanting to present women as a functional society, which they make, or the author makes very clear, that has nothing at all to do with the religion. That is the society itself. The religion says that you should respect your mothers, your wives. It's culture, not religion. And none of the characters in this book are particularly religious. They wear their headscarves when they're in Iran, but they do not in America, but they don't really leave the house. There's abuse, assault, sexual abuse, sexual assault, and it's very degrading towards women, but these women are trying to survive it. And the main takeaway that I get from this is people don't understand. People are always like, well, why don't you just leave? Like, why are you staying? Like, this is your fault. As a woman, why don't you escape? Why don't you get out of this situation? Like, it's your fault for staying in this situation. These women have never been outside their house. They love their family, and if they leave, they're giving up their family. Like, that's a big change. Change is hard. Like, you have the demon that you know, change is the demon you don't know. And some of these women don't even speak English. They have nowhere to go. They don't understand that there is, like, things that will help them, that there are resources for abused women, that there are shelters that they can go to. They don't know this. Their entire world is their little community and their women friends. And their entire culture says that if your husband's hitting you, you're doing something wrong. And he has every right to do it. They don't know that there is a different possibility. Or they know that maybe there is, but they're not sure, and they're not sure how to achieve it. So while yes, it is awful, it's not always the easy solution that those of us who are privileged to not be in abusive relationships or know how to escape from abusive relationships would be able to take. I thought this was amazing, and I thought it was a very important thing to read, especially with all like the judgment going around about Islamic and Muslim cultures, that it's like, they're people too. So I think everybody should read this, especially women. I highly recommend this, and again, I gave it 4 stars. This was the highest rated book for both fiction and debut author. So there's a reason it's highest rated. Next, I read the highest rated book in science fiction, which was Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is a collection of short stories, and I thought all of the stories were really good. It's really hard to tell you what it's about because none of the short stories really connect with each other than the fact that they're all somehow science fiction, but with like a bunch of different stories, it would take me forever to go through like what every single one of them. So I'm going to go through 2, and it's going to be the title, which is Exhalation. So the title story for the book is about like robots who find out that they're basically built in a steampunk kind of way where the air is what makes their brain works. So they have to change out their lungs every single day or else they die. And then if you find somebody who's died, you can like give them air again, but they have no brain function or memories. And basically it goes through one of the robots figures out how their brain works, which has something to do with airflow. I am definitely not smart enough to explain exactly how that works, but their entire people's thinking is slowing down because the air pressure is evening out in their world. And it's just a really interesting story. It wasn't one of my favorites, but I did think it was a very, very interesting story. Now, the story that was my favorite is called Omphalos, which I could be pronouncing wrong, which is a story about religion. But we have, I don't remember the term for it, but like religious scientist type things that actually, like there's religious people who actually believe like the world began like, what, like 4,000 years ago or something like that? I don't remember. Which is absurd because we could trace fossils and use science to tell the world existed long before that. In this story, they know and they can prove scientifically that the world began 8,912 years ago. So creation started exactly 8,912 years ago. And they can tell because fossilized trees, you can see where the like rings in the trees end, and you just get a full-grown tree with no rings because it hasn't gone through rain seasons or anything like that. Once you get to that point, you know that was the moment of creation. And then if the tree survives after its beginning year, then you get rings as it grows from there. You also have mummies, human mummies, who have no belly buttons. So you know that these were the first humans created. Like, it's just a really interesting take from a scientific perspective of a society that knows that a God created them and the exact moment of that creation. And it's just a really, really cool story. I'm not going to really go more into it because they're short stories, and the more I go into it, the more I give away. The final book that I read this month was the highest rated in the young adult fantasy category, which was The Toll by Neal Shusterman. So this is the conclusion to the Arc of Scythe series. I very much enjoyed this. It was like 600 something pages. It's a pretty big book. It's very hard to go into this without giving away a lot, but I will say that the first part of the book I didn't particularly care for because it was like build up where Citra and Ronan are not in the first part of the book. It's from other perspectives. I think there was a few too many perspectives in this book, and I didn't particularly care for that, but the story overall and how the Scythedom and the Thunderhead kind of come together and figure their shit out so the great utopia of the world can continue was a very interesting story. Fantastic conclusion. And this is one of the conclusions where it stands alone as the conclusion of a trilogy, but it gives you enough of like an open-ended that they definitely, or that Neal Shusterman can definitely write other books in this universe and continue the story. But the main story that we started with Citra and Ronan, or Rowan, is complete and done and good and happy, and yay, I love this. It was one of the best, or one of the better sci-fi books that I have read. It is in the fantasy category, but it's sci-fi. It's post-apocalyptic, well, utopia, dystopia, which is science fiction. And that covers all of the books that I read in January. If you're interested in seeing my TBR for February for my Century of Reading challenge, that will be up Friday. And if you were interested in seeing a TBR for the other books that I expect to read this month, leave a comment down below. I didn't record that last month, but if you're interested in seeing the more modern books that I think I'm going to read, then definitely leave that in the comments, and if I get really any interest at all, then I will record it. But I will see you Saturday.